大家好，欢迎大家出席第16届哈佛中国教育论坛。我是本届论坛主席张馨月 Valentina。这里是本届论坛的第一个分论坛活动现场——生涯教育。在这个快节奏、充满不确定的时代里，我们习惯了赶路，害怕重来，惧怕错选。我们比较着别人走的路，美化着自己没有走过的路。于是我们产生了空心病，焦虑、迷茫、无助，在十字路口踟蹰不前。生涯教育的缺失，让我们似乎忘记，实际上在人生这片旷野上，往哪里走都是往前走。下面让我们有请生涯教育分论坛的主创刘欣怡、汪希和嘉宾们为我们带来分享。
各位老师、各位朋友，大家好！非常感谢大家在百忙之中参加今天的论坛，欢迎来到哈佛中国教育论坛生涯教育分论坛。很荣幸今天可以跟大家在这里相遇，我是今天的分论坛主持人欣怡，也是这次分论坛的主创。也很荣幸和另一位主创 Nadia 一起与大家开启这场关于生涯教育的对话。在正式进入今天的议程之前，我们想先花一点点时间和大家一起梳理一下生涯教育这个概念。这个词啊，在中文语境还比较新，甚至说可能有点抽象。但我们发现，他所关心的问题其实和每一个人的成长都有关。比如，我想成为一个怎样的人？所以，我们想在开始之前，先建立一点点共同的理解。生涯教育到底在讨论什么？在我们的理解中，生涯教育并不等同于职业教育，而是帮助一个人更好地理解和认识自己，并主动去选择属于自己的人生方向。我们认为，生涯教育其实也在回应3个人生中的核心问题：我是谁？认识自己。我喜欢什么？探索世界。以及我想成为什么样的人？主动选择未来。
那为什么生涯教育很重要呢？作为老师，我其实遇到过很多看起来没有动力的学生，但实际上跟他们聊一聊之后，我就发现，其实他们并不是不想努力，而是没有机会停下来想一想我们刚刚说的那些问题。很多时候，他们都是被社会的期待或者是父母的安排在推动着前进，缺少的是空间和语言去表达真实的自己。而这样的情况并不是只在中国存在。有个数据让我印象很深，就是根据哈佛 Making Caring Common 项目在美国的研究，有58%的18到25岁的年轻人在过去的一个月都感到生活是没有或者几乎没有目标的。所以我们觉得生涯教育真的非常重要，因为我们要关注的是学生长期的幸福和意义。那在国内呢，我们的心理学家，于国良老师也说过，真正好的生涯教育不是帮学生选专业、找工作，而是帮助他们建立一个清晰的自我概念。所以这就是我们的愿景，希望年轻人可以真的活出自己，感受到人生是值得努力和探索的。不过今天的分享，我们不是为了给出任何的标准答案啊，我们只是想打开这个对话的空间。我知道在座的每一位朋友，我们其实有非常多的角色，无论您是学生、家长、老师，还是其他的教育从业者，大家之所以来愿意就是听我们这样一场关于生涯教育的讨论，说明我们就在关心这件事情。那么接下来就让我们进入今天的议程，一起来看一下生涯教育如何陪伴年轻人走出迷茫，找到自己属于自己的方向。那么在整一个论坛的过程中，随时我们都欢迎您在微信群或者直播间留言，我们每一位嘉宾都给大家就是预留
streaming
了回答问题
platforms.
的时间。
We have time allocated for Q&A, and we're looking forward to your questions. So this is today's agenda. So we will talk about the key challenges and the future opportunities in life education from US and Chinese perspectives. Then we will explore how East Asian culture shapes students' well-being and career choices. For the roundtable discussion, we will talk about how the collaboration between schools, families, and communities can build a new life education ecosystem. And eventually, we will talk about how to cultivate a sense of purpose and meaning in youth and empower them. I hope this gives new ideas to all of you.
Okay, now I'm very happy to introduce our first speaker today, Dr. Josephine Kim. Dr. Kim is a senior
我
lecturer
非常荣幸来介绍今天的第一名发言人，
Harvard Graduate School of Education.
他是 Joseph
The
King。
director of School Counseling Licensure Pathway. She is widely recognized for training a
他
generation
在
of school
培训
counselors. And
一
in our
代的
community,
学校咨询
we
师
truly
这个方
admire
面有
her
非常
in
丰
the
富的
field of
经验，
counseling and
并且
mental
呢，
health.
他在
Beyond
哈佛师生之中是非常受欢迎的学校心理咨询明星。另外，他在韩国的教育方面也有非常有影响力的工作，尤其是在心理健康支持与教育系统的结合之中，这个领域非常有影响力。今天我们非常荣幸来请他作为我们的嘉宾，他会讲一讲生涯教育领域面临的一些挑战和机遇，尤其是他们对于学生的个人认识和心理需。
Hi everyone, it's so great to be here, and it's truly
大家
my
好，
thank you for
我非常荣
having me
幸
in
能
this
够
space.
来到这里，也感
So
谢大家
today
的。
I'm thinking about in our short little time together, life education, especially thinking about where did we go wrong, and where can we go from here, especially when we think about education within the East Asian context. I think traditionally for centuries, education has been approached in a certain way. And, we don't want to throw all of that out. Certainly, there are really precious gems in the ways in which we've educated. But now that the culture has changed, generations have changed, we've become much more globalized. Before, we could only see what was happening in our own circles, but now we see how education is done all over the world. And it's so important to think about what are those key themes that really produce not only great students, but how do we actually produce decent people? How do we produce, especially my concern is the idea of a healthy student, somebody who's healthy across multiple perspectives and multiple domains of who they are. And so that's where I would like to start today. So in thinking about life education, it really is about developing somebody's whole self. If education in East Asia has mainly been about developing somebody's brain, their cognitions, their intelligence, I want to argue today that that's not enough. In fact, we're actually doing great amounts of damage when we only produce intellectual people, because intelligence has to be balanced by so many other things. If you look at people who have caused havoc on this world, who have actually done great amounts of damage, it's not that they lacked intelligence. In fact, I would say that they are pretty smart. They're highly intelligent. Oftentimes, they do have high IQs and they know a lot. But if we don't have these other domains that really balance that intelligence, for example, like somebody's morals, then they can't judge what is actually good for society and what's harmful to society. Then I'm going to use my intelligence and everything that I've gained from school, right? The knowledge, the understanding, and I'm going to use it in ways that are not helpful to society. And so, in many ways, life education means how do we develop people who are healthy, who are not only intellectually, right, really great, stellar, but how do we also produce human beings who are healthy on lots of different aspects? And so I want to argue that when we think about the whole self, life education really is about educating even the physical, right, aspect of who students are. If you really think about how unnatural education is, right now, education is 6 to 8 hours of sitting at a desk and cramming lots of material into our heads. I can tell you that children who've had an opportunity to move and stretch their bodies and get some, deep breaths in their lungs, they actually study better, right? So I also want to highlight that all of these domains are interconnected, that when I'm physically feeling at my best, that I can actually study better as well. Of course, intelligence and feeding the intellect is so important. I'm not saying let's throw that out. We need to make sure that our students are learning cognitively and their brains are expanding with new knowledge and new information. Right. So that piece is very important. But it's also important that our students are socially healthy, right? What good does it do if somebody is highly intelligent? They are ranked number one in the entire nation of China, but they do not have a single friend that they can turn to, right, for emotional support, for support. What if they feel so disconnected from the community as a school that they don't want to go to school, right? So you can see how all of these domains are very interconnected. What else? Emotional, of course. The emotional well-being has everything to do with how I connect with people socially, right? How I even feel physically, and also my capacity to hold intellectual information. So all of these things are connected. And of course, we can't miss the spiritual aspect of who we are. Spirituality, and I'm not talking about a particular religion right now. I'm talking about why do we live? Right? What is my purpose in life? Why do I go to this thing called school and learn all of these things? You know, what's great about Harvard University, and I've been here for about 20 years now, one of the most beautiful things about Harvard is usually I could say, I could pick any student off of the streets, right? And say, you study what you study. And more likely than not, they will tell me, well, when I was growing up, this was really something that I wanted, I needed as a student, but I didn't have that. So now I'm here to study this thing so I can take it back to my community and the younger generation can have a better experience than I did. What is that? That is a sense of purpose, right? That is a sense of spiritual identity. Why am I studying the things that I do? And how can I contribute to this world in a way that only I can, given my life experiences? That is a strong spiritual lens. And so all of these aspects are truly interconnected. You know, if I feel a strong sense of purpose, then guess what? I'm going to feel that inspiration I need to actually study. If I feel at my optimal physical self, I'm going to then have the physical capacity in my brain, right, to be able to absorb the information that a teacher is teaching me. If I feel socially connected to my school community, where, yeah, that's the school I go to, or yes, that is my school and that is my teacher and that is my classroom. I want to be there every day because if I'm not, then I feel like I'm missing out, right? That is a strong social sense. And then, of course, emotionally, we have to actually be fed emotionally through the things that we study. If I teach you math and say, memorize all these equations, right, and make sure you get the right answer, that doesn't really tap into my emotions. But what if I were to tell you, my gosh, did you know that math connects to real life in this way? The next time you go to the store with your grandmother, I hope you can actually calculate for us, right, for her, how much all of your items in the cart actually cost, right? If you can connect it to some sort of real life and also say, and by doing so, you can actually be a great tool to your grandmother. Emotionally, you're giving me purpose. Not only that, spiritually, you're also connecting me, right? And I notice here, spiritual is misspelled. My goodness, even the greatest educators misspell our words. Um, but here we go. Balance is really the key. Oftentimes, what we see in the Asian context is we feed and feed and feed. Are you hungry? Did you eat? What did you have for lunch? And oftentimes, it's because we come from countries where food was scarce, right? There was great poverty, there were wars. And in nations like that, making sure that people are being fed is actually very important. Not only that, in East Asian culture, food is love, right? Your parents may not say, I love you. You are so special. I'm so glad you're my child. They may never say that to you, but they will say, Cindy, did you eat today? Right? What did you eat? Right? Do you need to eat again? Everything is about food. But inadvertently, what that does for us is it accentuates our physical well-being, right? If Nadia is sick, then I'm going to rush you to the hospital. But if you're emotionally not feeling well, I don't know what to do with that, right? And that's because the balance of the attention that all of these domains get is really kind of out of balance, right? And so balance is key. You know, if I'm emotionally hungry and if I have no social connection, and you tell me, well, you know what, Dr. Kim, you sit there and eat food for 3 hours. Do you think that's going to help me? No. If I'm socially so hungry and I need that human connection, I need somebody who can listen to me and share my emotional burden. And you tell me, well, go and read a book for 3 hours. Is that going to help me? More than likely, it's not going to help me. Each of these domains have to be fed in each of the domains that actually work, right? If I'm physically hungry, I need physical food. If I'm socially hungry, I need social connection. If I'm intellectually not being challenged, then I need to be inspired intellectually, right? So you can see how each of these domains need to be fed in different ways. Overemphasizing one aspect is actually not helpful, but what we see in East Asian schools is intellect, intellect, study, study, study. In fact, I asked in my research, would ask young people, what is the number one thing your parents say to you the most? And guess what it is? Go study is the number one thing that parents say to their children the most. What does this mean? This means, you know what? I don't really care if you're emotionally doing okay. I really don't, concern myself whether you have friends or not, but I want to make sure you're top number one or two, because only then can you go to the best colleges and only then can you have the best connections in life, right? And that's what leads to success. Not that none any of those things aren't true, but again, it's not balanced, right? What we find is that students who are off the charts brilliant intellectually, and again, emotionally, they haven't grown. Have you ever seen adults when they get angry, they hit things, they throw things, right? They curse and they violate other people's spaces, right? We've all probably seen an example of that. Well, that's a perfect example of somebody who might intellectually be overgrown, but emotionally, socially, right? They haven't grown at all. So they're resorting to things that 3 or 4 year olds. I mean, at what age do we see children when they get angry? They try to take it out physically. They throw things, they pull at you, they pinch you, they pull your hair, usually around 2 or 3 or 4 years old, right? But if we're still acting in those ways as a 30-year-old adult, then emotionally you can see how we've been arrested and we haven't grown emotionally. No domain can be minimized. Oftentimes, what we see in East Asian education is that the emotional is very, very small. And it means that it doesn't get enough attention. We need to begin our schools by saying, gosh, we had a long weekend. I'm wondering how everyone is doing, right? And giving our students opportunities to tap into all of these different domains. Can we start with a stretch? Can we actually turn to a neighbor and talk about something that was a highlight from their weekend, right? And what these things do, these little small practices, it peels away the layers of somebody's emotions. It's almost like peeling away the layers of an onion. For example, if somebody has had an experience of death in their lives, if a child has lost a grandmother and they're coming to school, do you think they have the capacity to actually learn intellectually? Probably not. So, what we actually have to do is give attention to their emotions, give them an opportunity to peel away a layer of that onion. And essentially, what we're doing is we're not taking away the grief and loss, right? That's going to be with them for a long time. But by peeling away a layer, we're actually allowing them to hold it in a way that feels less intense. And when something feels less intense, it means they now have the capacity to hold intellectually what it is that we're trying to teach them. That's why no domain can actually be minimized. So, what does this mean emotionally, physically, spiritually, right? Socially, intellectually? especially when it comes to our mental health and emotionally in life education, we really have to approach this as mental health hygiene, right? When we talk about sleep hygiene, we talk about making sure your environment is set up in such a way that it promotes healthy sleep. Same thing. Mental health hygiene means let's set up our schools in such a way that it promotes their mental health. But you see two children here brushing their teeth. It doesn't mean that we throw away English, social studies, math, and history, and Chinese, and all of those things. It actually means before we go there, just 2 minutes a day. In fact, Nadia, how many times are you supposed to brush a day with your fingers? How
I,
many times?
yeah, twice.
Twice. For how long? Cindy, for how long are you supposed to brush your teeth?
Like around 3 minutes.
Yeah, actually 2 minutes. 3 minutes is actually pretty good. So think about that. When we brush our teeth for 2 minutes twice a day, we actually take care of a lifetime, right, issue with our mouth. We're cleaning, we're making sure we have clean breath, we're making sure we don't get gingivitis, gum disease, right? All of the plaque buildup. I mean, even oral cancers. How? Just by 2 minutes twice a day. Same thing. Emotionally, that's exactly what we need. We're not saying you need 24 hours to do this. We're saying let's embed small things in life education in our schools that we can do that really helps with mental health hygiene. We wouldn't say, for example, I haven't slept for an entire month, but the next weekend I'm sleeping for 72 hours, right? 48 hours. That's impossible. Our physical bodies cannot do that, right? It's the same thing. We can't do something in overload and expect that to actually be helpful to us. It has to be in bite sizes, 2 minutes a day, twice a day. In fact, everybody who's in this space, I encourage you on your phones right now. Put in an alarm. Every hour, it should tell you to do some deep breathing. Why? Because it tells you that when we have stress, it actually goes into our bodies. We wear stress. We not only wear stress, but we wear anxiety. It doesn't matter what culture you're coming from, what age group you belong to, what race or ethnicity you are. Everybody wears anxiety the same way. It is through our bodies. Our pupils dilate, we have shortness of breath, our heart is racing fast, and we cannot think clearly because we're ready to fight or flee, right? Fight, flight, freeze, all of those things. And because of that, embedding 2 minutes a day, twice a day, the mental health hygiene of taking deep, cleansing breaths actually scientifically helps our students to focus better, right? Emotionally, it helps them to regulate their emotions. And it's very simple. We just lead them through deep breathing. And what we know scientifically is that it cleanses our blood of toxins by 70%, carbon monoxide, carbon dioxide. So why not engage in this as a mental health hygiene practice? Not only that, our students experience lots of harm throughout the day and they experience emotions. So why not give them opportunities, small opportunities to name what it is that they're experiencing? When my friend, right, so and so said this to me, I felt very betrayed because they didn't invite me to their party, right? And I found out everybody else in my class was invited. If I name this for myself, scientifically and neurologically, what we're doing is we're engaging our left brain, which is the prefrontal cortex, right? And that actually helps to then regulate our emotions, which is on the right side of the brain. And so, scientifically, by using language to actually name what it is that we're experiencing, we're helping our students to regulate their emotions. And again, when we help our students to do this, very small, maybe twice a day, 2 minutes a day, it's creating more capacity for them to hold more intellectual information, right? Very small things. And so, as I conclude, what I would like to offer to us is when we think about the multi tiered systems of support in a school, where every student, every child, even every teacher can benefit from these small practices when we embed life education, especially mental health hygiene, into everyday life practice. Right? They come to school. Maybe I start out with deep breathing. I don't know what happened in our homes over the weekend. Some of us had lots of exciting things happen. some of us had hurtful things happen to us right over the weekend. Let's take a moment, ground ourselves, and get our bodies and our hearts, our emotions ready to learn, right? And sometimes that means as teachers, as educators, we're very vulnerable. Many times I came to school during the pandemic, right? Online Zoom classes. And I would start with, gosh, it was very hard for me to be on camera, right? In this space right now. What's it like for you? Can we take a moment in our breakout rooms and share with each other what it's like for you to be here? And then say after that, after you've had that moment, to be able to say, well, we're here anyway. There are lots of things about life we cannot control, and things are unpredictable. Many things are uncertain. There's no way to know. But one thing we do have control over is how we engage in the space. So are you ready to learn? Because what we learn and what we take back into our communities, that's where we can have great influence. And that is the one thing we can actually control right now in a time where everything is volatile and we cannot predict what's going to happen minute to minute, right? What did I do just there? I engaged the emotions. I engaged maybe the physical because I had you doing deep breathing. I engaged your spirituality because I reminded us of the purpose of why it is that we study, right? And I connected you socially to somebody else in the breakout rooms so you could share. So the more we can connect these domains to our education, and the more we can embed bite-sized, small mental health hygiene moments into our life education in school, the more students not only are motivated to learn, but they now have the capacity to be able to absorb the things that they're learning. So it's much more about not only the content of what we're trying to teach, but it's also the process, and it's also the way that they engage and are present in our education. So with that as my final note, we cannot do for our students what we don't do for that you are feeding yourself in each of these domains, that you too are becoming healthy as a whole person, because only then can we encourage our students to do the same. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you so much for your incredibly heartfelt and insightful sharing. I love the toothpaste and the bite-sized mental health hygiene. I think it's really powerful if we could embody anything in our daily practice. And I do think you are empowering all of our educators in terms of taking care of ourselves. Okay, let me share. Before we move on to the next sections, we like to share a short video. We have some special guests here today, students. They are the primary participants and stakeholders of life education. Their voices are actually at the center of what we want to hear. But they're not here to give the right answers. They're here to share how personally they make sense of questions like, why do we study? Okay, but also, okay, 我在进入下一个环节之前呢，我这有个短片，这个短
Before
片的主
entering
角
the next
是
session, I have a short
他们是
video,
他们才是
and
生涯教育
the
我们的核
speeches
心
are
精神，他
delivered
们
by
是生命的
students.
最重
They
要
should be the center
他
of
们
life
展现了
education,
我
so
们
their
在任何
voices
的标准
想到底要干什么，就是你学习是为了啥？但是想了半天，你就是如果你没有一个就是很清楚的目标，自己想干什么的话，其实我现在就其实还有点，也不能说特别迷茫吧，反正就是不知道干什么，然后也不知道学习是为了干什么，每天就是去上课完成任务，就像完成任务一样。
自己内心中可能会有两种声音吧，有一个声音告诉我自己，我应该要怎么做，我不能怎么做。这个声音可能是像是价值观的一个具象化的表现，但是身体的本能有时候又不大想去做一些特别有意义的事情，或者说对于
我们。它是很强的一种力量，就是你也许会痛苦，但是你会继续这么做，直到你达到那个目标。但是它的弊端也非常非常的明显，特别是当我看我身边的朋友，很多朋友他们都是重点高中转过来的，就是当你达到那个目标之后，你这辈子都不想再碰这个东西了。就我之前就看到一个人说，他以前很喜欢文学嘛，然后他上了文学课之后呢，他就这辈子都不再碰文学书了。
2年级的时候，我当时都不是我父母给的压力，就是我自己可能心里都是必须进步5分以上，如果进不到5分的话，我真的会死。
就是某个点，某个学科的可能某一个点，让我产生了一定兴趣，然后呢，会支持我去学习下去，就是抱着玩的心态去学下去。
能够全身心投入到课堂当中的时候，其实是个很快乐的一个过程，因为你在接受知识。我觉得这个过程本身，你不会感到学习是件很疲惫的事情，
然后主动的去花很多时间，比如说我从放学到家想到要干什么事情，我就一直做到吃饭或者一些别的重要的事情，或者我累了会停下来。
你描述不了这个东西，就是在莫名的推动着你去做，然后你会很开心。然后你不去锻炼1-2天的话，你自己还会觉得就是很愧疚，然后就感觉就是对不起自己。
因为我自己跟那些别人去比的话，我的成绩啥也比不上，然后没有什么特殊的一些点，也没有什么特殊的技能去掌握，然后呢就在想，我到底值不值我父母去往我身上砸这么多钱去培养我？
就是说，我很讨厌现代社会的一点，就是他们总是认为，哇，数学就是有用，它就是没用，它能给你带来一份工作的东西就是有用和没用。我是很讨厌这一点。我认为学习它真的是可以带给你很多不同的东西，即使是你很讨厌的东西，或者说我很讨厌的东西，我也会去学一下。为什么呢？因为我知道它的价值绝对不仅于此，而且还有一个，比如说我们学美术，对吧？它对我有什么用呢？我以后是绝对不可能学美术的呀。那有什么用？我做笔记的时候它就很有用，对吧？做笔记我要怎么排版，它就很有用，对吧？比如说我搭配一件衣服的时候它就很有用，对吧？我现在染什么颜色头发它就很有用，戴什么样子的耳钉，它都是有用的呀。这些东西对你人生来说没有意义吗？你的人生难道不就是我们要美美的出现吗？对吧？
我现在能坐在这儿跟你说话，我能活着，我能呼吸，我能感受我身上的每一个器官都能运作，我本身这件事就是很有价值感的，它根本不需要其他更多的东西去体现我自己的价值感，
是能够感受到自己被需要，或者说是一种能给这个社会或者说是给自己创造更多的价值，或者说是一点点影响和改变，或者说是跟周围的人带来一点影响和改变的东西。
Thank you, Nadia, for that beautiful video. It really brings students' voices to the center. Now that we've explored both theory and lived experience, we are going to shift gears into our roundtable discussion, where we'll hear from 3 incredible practitioners. 接下来是我们的圆桌讨论环节，我们有幸请到了
Now let's move on to the roundtable discussion. We invite Shen Ziyun, Yan Qingxian, and Dodo to our roundtable discussion.
上海新优质学校研究所副所长，全球教育年报报告主编。
Ms. Shen Ziyun is an expert in school strategic development and consulting. He has led many schools through future-oriented education reforms. Principal Yan is the principal of the affiliated high school of Sun Yat-sen University. In the context of exam-driven education, Principal Yan has promoted the combination of life education with traditional academic instruction. Ms. Dodo is a representative of the private education sector. She specializes in translating the principles of life education into practical services for families. So for the roundtable discussion, we have prepared questions for the 3 guest speakers. First, Ms. Shen Ziyun, you mentioned that education needs to shift from an industrial society model to knowledge economy model to cultivate lifelong learners. Could you talk about these 2 models and why this transformation is essential?
Thank you for your question.
So I listened to the speech delivered by Professor Kim,
and
I listened to the voices of the students, and I'm actually now very emotional. I'd like to to the topic of this panel. Life education and it will be based on my own journey. And I've been thinking the previous conversation we've had. So my experience focused on K-12 education. I'd like to respond how we can add the link of life education. For example, we encourage primary school students to focus on exploration. I'm not sure how many parents or students are here with us today. We might see that for primary school students, they often say, I want to be a scientist, I want to be an engineer, I want to be a teacher, I want to be a cook, a chef. And parents would say, why don't you have a single purpose? Why is your purpose always changing? But for primary school students, we often say that dream is not there to realize. It is just to make children's life meaningful. So it's fine that they want to be a teacher this week. They will have a very meaningful week. For the next week, they might want to be a chef, and they will have another meaningful week. So dream is not there to be realized. It is just to make life meaningful. So making choices and exploration is essential for primary school students. And for secondary school students, they need to learn to give up. In many occasions, parents might take their children to different shows and exhibitions every week, and children might say that it's boring. I don't want to be an astronaut. Parents and teachers would be upset. I made a lot of effort to provide you with these opportunities, and you don't want to be an astronaut. So to these teachers and students, I would say that you have succeeded in telling children what they're not suitable to do. So in secondary school, they need to know what they can give up. So this is the value for secondary school students. And after exploration and choices and giving up, after students go to high school, they would know their passion. They can identify what they truly want. So for K-12 education, we use this very simple approach to respond to today's topic, and I believe it is meaningful for students to gradually find who they are. This is a valuable process, but in the traditional industrial society, a core topic is standard answer, because we only have one specification for nurturing talents. And the children in the video have already told us about the stress they feel. Success in the society is shaped by the traditional industrial society, so they feel lost and they struggle. So we talk about life education, and it is associated to mental health problems. The point I try to make here is that for teenagers, there is no such thing as mental health disease. For younger kids, the problems are from the family or the school. We often say the school shuts a door for a child, shuts a window, and even doesn't leave a shed of light. And of course, the child would have mental health problem. If the family or the school open a window or a door, the child wouldn't struggle with mental health issues. A child doesn't have mental health problems in the vacuum. It is because the doors and windows are shut. In traditional societies, Adults are accustomed to shutting down, and they define success as only one set standard answer. But in today's economic world, it's open, it stretches individuality, it is full of choices. You are a person, and every person is different. You can be yourself. We should move on from standard answers to solutions that can deal with challenges in the real world, and everyone needs to find their own values. So this morning, I was asking for ChatGPT's help for a 2-day plan, and I was amazed by the result it gave me. So I was talking to my partner. I was impressed that AI seems to be quite impressive and powerful. However, the power comes from the cooperation between AI and the individual using it yourself, because it only provides you with a solution when you raise a question. Maybe 100 people would raise the same question, but you get 100 different answers from AI. Manage the AI system. You should be a leader and supervisor. You can create a good ecosystem with them, and you can be good partners. So it is essentially making you try to know yourself. Because if you give different questions, you get different feedback, and it tells you that you are two different individuals, entirely different people. You can be yourself, and you can be a better self. You can cooperate with AI. So in this age of knowledge economy, I give up the models that I wanted to talk about. I just want to say that you should be an individual that make your own choices. And you should respond to the questions raised by the real world and provide solutions. I think this is what's different from the industrial society, because now we do not have a standard answer. Now we make active choices. And all this for parents and teachers is a great challenge. Please leave a door open. Please leave a window open so that your children can create possibilities, because this is their time. We often say, who are children? Children will still be here when we are gone. They will be in the world for many years. So why should we define their future with our standard? In the age of economy, they have new possibilities. And this is a great challenge for schools. They need to change the standard answers and create more possibilities for children. They need to create more choices so that children can discover about themselves. So that's all for my speech. Thank you. Thank you so much. So you talked about standard answers. So in this environment that stresses standard answer, you talked about how can we encourage children's development. I'd like to listen to the insights of Principal Yan, because he is very experienced in creating an environment for children to live in. Professor Yan, the floor is yours.
Oh, 严校长，我好像听不到您说话。诶，可能您要重新再进一下会议，还是可能那个麦克风没有连上，暂时听不到您说话。
Sorry, there are some technical issues.
可能有点网络问题。
对，那这样子的话，其实我觉得像刚刚沈老师分享到一个点和 豆豆老师，您之前有提到过清单思维
So,
和
Miss
孩子的这个
Dou,
创业思维这块
you
也
talked
有一
about
些不谋
the
而合之处啊，那
entrepreneur
能分享一
mindset
下这
of
种思维，
children
就是在
and
实
a
践中间不
checklist
同之处，以及
mindset.
您是
Could you
如
talk
何
about
在生涯教育
the
中去培
difference
养
between
这个
these two
创业思维
mindsets and how do you nurture the mindset of an entrepreneur? Okay, thank you. So, just like Professor Shen, I was quite impressed by the speech delivered by Kim. And at Harvard, well, I came to the US when I was 15 years old. So I studied here and I worked here. The majority of my career and even my life is in the US. So I've been thinking about the sense of meaning and purpose. I want to bring the principles of life education to real families and practice them on children. So in the video, the teenagers reminded me of my students. Every day we will have a one-to-one conversation, and these are the topics that come up in our conversations. So as a private sector educator, we can accompany children and parents in the smallest unit, family, and we can implement the principles of life education. I'd like to talk about two dimensions based on my practical experience. I'd like to talk about how we can truly implement the principles of education in Chinese families. So the first dimension is about products. The other dimension is about the market and promotion. For products, I believe that the most important thing is that, for example, as an educator, as a tutor, my power and my own being in all aspects that Professor Kim mentioned should be balanced. I should first accept myself before I can take the energy to children and families. I should first consider myself as an individual before I consider my students as a wholesome individual. So in terms of product, I stress one-on-one deep conversation and companionship. It might be a bit similar to counseling. We conduct deep conversations. One key point is that I do not just give recommendations to students. I help students look at themselves in the mirror. The true goal of life education is to make a person see themselves. I don't want to say that I'm better, so you should do what I say. Because in this case, educators might become another parent for children, and this is not helpful. We should become a mirror to help children see themselves, to see what they become alive, to see what their powers lie. So one kid in the video raised a question about a coach or tutor. So if there are no constraints, what do you want to do? Every child has their own ideas. Many parents come to us and say that my children have no idea. They don't want to do anything. But if we talk to a child professionally, every child has a point where they want to express and they know what they want to do. So it is crucial for us to give feedbacks to children to help them see themselves. So this is what we truly need to do. Through deep dialogues and companionship, we should take one step after another to help children understand themselves. So in terms of our product, we have designed a framework for self-awareness. In our dialogue, we will guide our children to think about their advantages, their passions, both in their career and life, and their values, aspirations in life, and their sense of purpose. So these are the broader questions, but they provide children with an opportunity and space. We would also invite parents into the dialogue so that they can hear the voice of their children. And this space is the core of our work. It's like the children and the family looking into the mirror together. So this is the core aspect of our product. The tutor need to have good self-awareness and self-control. They need to know that they are a mirror that help children see. In terms of the market, we spent around 2 years before we could truly identify the approach in the Chinese market so that parents would be willing to pay for our product. Generally, in the Chinese market, the awareness of life education is a bit weak. So as an institution, in many occasions, we have to educate the market and educate the client. We need to build the bridge. So the first step is to raise parents' awareness. They need to understand the importance and meaning of life education, and this is something that's worth investing. It took us around 2 years before we get sufficient feedback and experience. So 3 pieces of experience. First, the first threshold is the awareness of parents. It might require schools and the society to do more work, because individually, if parents do not believe life education is important, so as private entities, we couldn't even reach them. But as long as they believe life education is important, we have the space for conversation. The second threshold is to tapping into the sweet spot of parents. So most of the parents focus on how to motivate their children, and this is what parents can relate to. So this is a sweet spot. Another sweet spot is about mental health. And this is what parents can see. They know what their children feel like. So these are ways that we build connections with parents. Another sweet spot is also important in the Chinese market. It is their pursuit for academic achievement. And children themselves might also want to go to a better school or go to the US for foreign education. So when we combine the sweet spots, it's what Sining mentioned in the beginning. For example, for families who want to send their children to the US to study, they need to shift from a checklist mindset to an entrepreneur mindset, because the initial cognition is why they cannot achieve the result they desire. If you use the mindset of an entrepreneur, of course, we will explain what are the mindsets. And when we talk to parents about it like this, they will recognize the meaning of what we do, and they know it's in line with what they want to do. They want to tackle the problems and reach the goal, but they need to use the proper approach, and that is what we can provide. The last point is also very important. In terms of the market, the last step before the parent pay the bill is trust. They need to know that the tutor deserves trusting, and the children also need to feel that you deserve trusting. And that's how they are willing to talk to you. So in the market, before we settle a deal, we arrange for a communication between tutors and parents and tutors and students. So this is what we call a chemistry check. It's like in a romantic relationship, because it involves interpersonal relationship. Trust is the foundation. So that's how we use our own energy in the emotional, social, and the spiritual dimension to affect the parents and students. And of course, you can use your own story in life education. So after you have done all parts of the work, the tutor itself, themselves matter. They can be a role model. and they can show the parents and children why they can help them to reach their target. And that's how we can initiate a cooperation with the parents. So this is our practice in terms of the market. And that's all for my speech. Thank you. So Professor Yan, can you open your microphone now? If there are internet problems, maybe we can turn off the camera and test your sound. So there is a question for Professor Shen. So now we have limited resources. So against this context, how can we create individualized environments and spaces to develop their personal development? Do you have any insights that you can share? In my experience, I get questions like this very often. But for questions like this, for the practitioners in life education, we might find that the essence of this question is not truly accepting children's development as they are. They are actually giving up because what they actually say is because of the limitation of the environment, I couldn't provide what the children need. So I'd like to ask the question, who is not allowing for individual development? In the transformation from the industrial society to knowledge economy, I believe that the value of every educator is challenged. When we firmly believe every child is an individual and their life needs guidance, and then you would try everything you can to help the children. But if you don't truly believe in the well-being of children, you will find obstacles everywhere. So first, we need to find the values. Are you willing to go out of your way, despite the limited resources, to design an individualized life career for children? This is a question you need to ask yourself. I've got another question. In a very remote place in Beijing, in Huairou, we have a primary school in a mountain village. They have extremely limited resources because it's in the area in the mountains. But after a period of revolution, they transformed into a future-oriented school. And I'm quite impressed because there is an orphan in the mountain, and the children in the orphan also entered the school to study. Previously, we discussed how school can motivate children to explore their own path. In the school I just mentioned, there are over 100 motivation systems for children. One of the systems involves having the students design a program to keep a record of your challenges, and other people can also challenge you. So one of the orphans defined a challenge of mountain climbing, and the child has always been top one in mountain climbing because he's very fast, and everyone wants to challenge him. And he kept the record for a long time, and he is still the fastest. So this motivation system turned on the button of motivation for this child, and he is willing to do everything with passion. And the child received an interview, and during the interview, he was asked about his future plan. He said that I want to be a soldier. Because I keep a record in mountain climbing, I grew up in the orphan, but I benefited from the school. I benefited from the students and the teachers. That's why I want to defend our community. I want to defend the future generation. That's why I want to be a soldier. So this motivation system opened up new possibilities and understandings for the child, and I was deeply impressed. It is not about the limitation of resources. You have to firmly believe in the value of the students. You have to firmly believe in the possibilities of the children. And that's why you design over 100 motivation systems. And each student will find something that is in line with their own values. For teachers themselves, they can establish good relationship with their children. It also helps children find their own motivation, because from primary school to secondary school, many children like a subject because they like the teacher teaching the subject, and that's why they like studying. That's something you can do at the very least. You can become a popular teacher and add more motivation for your students. And there are even tree climbing courses in the school I just mentioned, and some students get motivated because they're good at tree climbing. They even held a TED Talk under the tree, and they would start a journey for speeches. Things like this don't require many resources. It can be done with limited resources. The point is to find the value and believe in the children, believe in their differences and possibilities, and that's how you can guide them in life education. So for whoever raised this question, please think about this. Are you truly willing to find the value in the children and acknowledge their differences? This is what we truly need to think of. Yes, I totally agree. That's about the being of the teachers. You yourself is enough as long as you can accept and appreciate the individual in front of you. In our practices, we find that for parents and teachers, something you can do with the significant impact is to listen. You can listen to your children and your students. You can create a space where they can freely express themselves. If you believe that the world outside is so dark and dangerous, you can simply open the door or the window for the child through listening. You don't need to do anything else. Just listening would be enough to motivate your children. Yes, thank you. I'd like to add something else, which makes us believe in our students. For parents and teachers alike, you should always stand right by your child to defeat the problems. You shouldn't stand by the problem and try to defeat your child. As long as you can believe in this, you will help them build their life. Thank you very much. Let me check. Professor Yan, can you speak now? I'm sorry about the technical issues. So there is another topic I'd like to discuss with you. So in the future, if we want to nurture more practitioners in life education, what can schools and communities do? Do you have any suggestions for them? I'd like to go back to that principle. You might be an educator, social worker, or parent. Within your ability, you should try to turn on the motivation system for the children. You shouldn't shut down the doors and windows for them. In our school, you might know because we talked about this. In the schools that I do consultation for, they have created some ideas and principles. They help children find where they can be great and guide them through the path. So you need to identify their strength and you need to pave the way for their further development. This is the mission for all schools. And if you keep this in mind, the school can create many motivation systems in school. If you come to China, please feel free to visit the school I just mentioned. The school has a candy factory. Children like candies. They design the candies as study tasks, and they start a candy firm. They start with the fresh nuts, and then they are combined into different forms of candy. They give reminders of allergy, and they would produce tasty candies. And they have run the pilot program for 6 months. And I even bring the candies they produce as gifts when I go on travels in other countries and cities. The candies they produce have spread all over the geography. And this is a process of trade. The trading process is the motivation. After 6 months, their candy factory has earned over 7,000 RMB. So in the school, they also have a shipping company. They need to sell their products and services. They also have many art classes and studios. They do sculpture and clothing. And recently, a student started to make sculpture. The theme is an animal species near extinction. He spent 3 months to study the history of the animal, to understand why they are at this near extinction state. They want to help the animal, but because of limited capacity, he chose art as the approach. He makes sculptures of the animal in a very adorable way, while their habitat is disappearing the minute we speak. He made this adorable sculpture of the animal, and then he held an auction. The starting price is 299 RMB, and last year the price has reached 698 RMB. A curator from Shanghai came to the school to visit, and he saw the sculpture, and eventually he wanted to buy the piece of sculpture at the price of 888 RMB. He tells the student that I like this sculpture and I want to buy it and put it in the Shanghai Natural Museum. This is the first time that a sculpture is added to the collection in the Natural Museum, and the curator believes that it's very meaningful because it is an attempt of a child to save an animal. Through studying their history and after the curator bought the sculpture, it is placed into the Natural Museum for visitors to see. So this is a way of showing how the motivation system creates possibilities for students. Maybe the child will become an artist in the future. Maybe he will advocate for animals. We do not know. They might be a scientist. They might be an artist. But during his experience in secondary school, he created an art piece and it could have an impact on his life. In our school, we believe that we have to help children to transform their power to a path. We shouldn't say this is impossible. We should get rid of the hurdles and create possibilities so that they can sell their candies, they can sell their ships, so that they can exhibit the artwork they created to the audience. We should get rid of all the hurdles and create possibilities for them. And these are the critical moments during their development that might impact their whole life. Thank you for your insights. Yes, I am also very impressed. So, Ms. Dodo, do you have anything to respond to? For example, do you have any cases that you want to share with us when you cooperate with families? You still have 2 to 3 minutes. Thank you. I think I'm going to talk about our cooperation with parents. So I will talk about what parents can do. So for a child, parents have significant influence during their development. So sometimes we would coach our parents and we would tell them what is the mindset that breaks down the hurdle. First, you need to listen. As I just said, you should encourage children to express, and that is a form of support. You do not deny them, you listen to them, you do not despise them as being naive, you do not shut the door, and that's how you open the door. Your relationship with your children would be strengthened if you're willing to listen. Another useful practice is to expose your children to adults with high energy. For example, in our program, we have career coaches. We have invited 50 people who are working themselves. They are passionate and they have their stories in their career. They are willing to mentor students. They are willing to have one-on-one conversations with the children. So as parents, in your own life, there might be some adults who are suitable as role models for children. They can provide some guidance. You don't need to do all the work yourself. You're not responsible for everything. You can open up the world and guide the children to be exposed to more high-energy people. You should expose them to more experience, and you should step away from controlling the whole process. You don't have to know what they talk about. You don't have to know what their conversation is about. You shouldn't take control of everything. Just expose your children to outstanding individuals as a whole person, both mentally and physically, and socially and emotionally. Naturally, they will absorb the energy. The best thing you can do as a parent is to listen to their children and let go of many things, to expose your children to different things and people. In our program, we can see the changes of children in different ways. For example, children who are good at good at some subjects and bad at other subjects. They try to do things to make up for their transformation and the merits of the children. For example, a child is good at literature because the child has presented me with what they have written. I can see their excellence and advantages in this aspect, and that shows their appreciation of beauty. We have to help parents to see the advantages of children and have the children spend their time and energy to things that they're good at and interested in. And then we connect children with practitioners in the areas that they're good at. In this way, children can see their own advantages in literature and they would know that they can make a good career out of it. So, of course, their academic results have improved, and the children themselves would know what education system they want and what school they want to go to. So we got feedback from parents that their children have become ever more confident. This transformation is a transformation into a wholesome individual. So this is from a parent's perspective, what we should do and what we shouldn't do. And they are interconnected. Thank you for your insights. Through today's dialogue, we can see that effective life education is not about career itself. It should cover the ecosystem of families, schools, and communities. It requires cooperation to guide teenagers to discover the true self. So let's now give the floor to another Harvard professor, Richard.
Oh, okay. Thank you so much for our speaker today. That was a very rich and thoughtful discussion. Now, to close our today's panel, I'm absolutely delighted to introduce someone who means a lot to me, Professor Richard Weisbord. Rick is a senior lecturer at the Harvard Graduate School of Education and the faculty director of the Making Caring Common project. Over the many years, Rick has devoted his career to exploring how young people develop a strong sense of meaning and purpose, empathy in their lives, focusing especially on moral development and the role of education in shaping our youth. Rick has been my professor for 2 semesters and is also my academic advisor. He's the most supported educator I've ever met. He often says that he hopes to meet with every student's one-on-one, and he truly means it. He doesn't just teach the concepts, he embodies them. So today, Rick will help us understand why purpose and meaning matter so profoundly for young people and what we as educators and parents can practically do to support them in their journeys. Okay, please join me in warmly welcome Professor Richard Weisbord. Now, this will be like an interview style discussion, Rick. Many of our audience members may be meeting you for the first time. So could you briefly walk us through your career path and highlight a few key pivotal, moments that shape your direction, or your sense of purpose?
I'd love to. And good morning, everyone. It's great to be here. I'm a huge fan of Nadia's, and I'm delighted to be in this conversation with you, Nadia, and appreciate your inviting me. So my career path in many ways for many of us began pretty early in childhood. I grew up in a family where there was, woven into the fabric of our family was a commitment to other people and a commitment to our communities. And my mother was very involved in programs that provided support for low-income families, young children. My father was very involved in political campaigns and work around justice. And fairly early in my life, I began to feel like we live in a country with very dramatic inequities, and that I had a role to play. I wanted to play a role in achieving justice. And my mom used to kid me that, a lot of kids want to be generals. A lot of boys want to be generals in wars. I wanted to be a general in the war on poverty. Lyndon Johnson had started a war on poverty. But, there are many different ways to pursue that. And I have not been somebody who has had a single goal. I worked as a clinician in low-income communities. That was a very pivotal part of my career. And much of it I loved, but I found myself focused much more about the conditions under which people were living, not being able to have food, not being able to have housing, being ricocheting between one social service center and another. And I became very interested in how do we create systems that better support low-income people, and started working at the Kennedy School. So that was another big pivot. I worked at the Kennedy School of Government for many years, doing public policy. Around 15 or 20, about 20 years ago, I became very interested in moral development again. And this was another pivot. And it was partly because I was raising my kids, and I became very focused, very aware of the degree to which we have elevated personal success, achievement, and happiness as the primary goals of child raising, and demoted or marginalized caring for other people and caring for the common good. And, I won't go through our research now, the research, but the research basically shows that, you ask kids most important to them, and between achievement, happiness, and caring comes in last. And you ask them what's most important to their parents, caring is even more likely to come in last. And I think we should all pause and think about that for a minute, because I think the degree to which we have elevated individual success, in the US anyway, may be unprecedented in our history. And that many of the problems we see in our country right now have as a root that we have not prioritized caring for others and caring for people who are different from us. So I think we've got to go caring for others and caring for people who are different from us. So Nadia, that's sort of a quick update. I became interested in meaning and purpose partly because I'm very interested in moral purpose. What makes a child want to act in ways that improve the world? How do we expose children, high school students, to opportunities that make living a life of service or a life of working for justice or advocacy a compelling opportunity for them? And I think we're going to talk about this, but I also became concerned about the single purpose framing.
Yeah. I think we could elaborate on the single purpose frame, because that's a very interesting topic. And I don't see a lot of discussion in China. I mean, also moral purpose, but let's start with the single purpose. I think many students grows up, they think they need to find one single purpose or calling or passion. If they can't, they'll think to some degree they failed. So why do you think this mindset can be misleading? And if so, how can we support young people in staying open to multiple purposes?
So I think, in a way that the purpose movement, and, has a number of origins. It, has some origins in religion and, in finding a mission or calling, as you said, a calling. It has origins in Joseph Campbell, who wrote about mythology, and that people should find their bliss. And, we talk a lot about finding your passion. And, I think part of it was a very good thing. It was a reaction to intense achievement pressure that a lot of young people are just achieving to achieve. They don't even know why they're achieving. And that's very important for them to uncover what's meaningful to them, or a passion or a calling or a mission that will give meaning to their achievements. So they're not just aiming to get to the next step, which can burn you out to achieve for ways that are not meaningful to you. The problem, I think, became with what you're describing, which is this idea that you can somehow burrow into yourself and find your calling or your mission, or you can excavate, you can dig up your calling or mission. And Bill Damon, who does really great research on purpose, he says only about 15% of young people have a mission or calling. And it's great that some, certain numbers of young people have a mission or calling. But I don't think most of us are built that way. And I don't think most of us are built that way at many points in our lives. I think we're interested in a lot of things. We, hopefully we care about a lot of things, and we're finding our way. And so uh, I began to feel like this wasn't really the right way to talk about it. And Mike Knuckle and Eric Tishalis talk about possibilities rather than purpose, not one purpose, but here are a number of possibilities, which I think is getting closer to it. But I also think that the conversation about purpose became focused on careers, when in our data, most people don't find meaning and purpose primarily in their careers. They find it in their relationships first and foremost, but also, sometimes in their spiritual lives and their hobbies, in other domains of their life.
Mm. Okay, yeah, that's very helpful. So you cover that purpose can be in relationships, and then also not all of us. In fact, maybe we could say most of us won't necessarily need a purpose, but it is a kind of psychological capacity, right? According to Damon's study. So what would a purposeful team or adult experience like? What kind of benefits if for people if they have purpose?
So, the research seems to be solid about this, that purpose has all kinds of benefits. It has emotional benefits in terms of well-being. It can have academic benefits. It has benefits in terms of resilience. The people who have purpose tend to be able to withstand adversity. Viktor Frankl, quoting Nietzsche, says those who have a why can endure almost any how. Viktor Frankl was in a concentration camp, and he found meaning in a concentration camp, and it really helped him endure. So I think purpose can be beneficial in all kinds of ways, but I don't think that means you have to have a single purpose. I mean, like if you were to ask me about my life now, I get purpose in my teaching and working with Nadia, with you, other students. I get purpose in my work with Making Care Common. I get purpose in supporting the Ed School. I get a lot of purpose and meaning in my family. I don't know if I would call it purpose in my family, but I got purpose and meaning in my family. So I do think having something, and maybe the word purpose is, maybe misleading. Having goals that are energizing and meaningful, that bring you fulfillment, is really important. I just don't think it has to be one goal. It can be a lot of different goals. And I think those goals can shift a lot in the course of your life.
Yeah, yeah. What about happiness? Like, I think some of our guests also mentioned today that purpose has the mental health benefits. Some parents, they are saying nowadays they want their children to be happy. They don't want them to just achieve. But does that mean that having a purpose will make you feel happy, or what is the connection?
Well, I tend to think purpose does generate happiness, but Nadia, I talked about this a little bit in class. There's a difference between what the Greeks call eudaimonic happiness, which is meaning and gratification, and hedonic happiness, or hedonism, or pleasure. And some purposes, I'm worried about what's going on in the country right now. So I may spend a significant amount of time working to do my part to fight what's going on in the country that I'm concerned about. That would give me a lot of purpose. I would feel a deep sense of purpose and meaning about that work. A lot of it wouldn't be fun. A lot of it would be very stressful. So I wouldn't say, in a clear way, this gives you happiness. Standing up for an important cause, standing up to a bully, standing up to somebody who has sexually harassed somebody else. Those things can put you in harm's way. Taking care of somebody, who has a chronic illness can give you a sense of meaning and purpose, but it's not fun often.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think
I think purpose can give you gratification, meaning I would hesitate to say it in a lot of circumstances. I don't think it gives you, what I would call joy or fun.
Yeah, a lot of times purpose come with struggle, effort, and doubt, but we know that it's a commitment we make and we find meaningful to ourselves and others. That actually brings me to another question. Um, you know, not all purposes are good, right? Some can even be harmful. So, what do you think? Why do you think it's important to connect purpose with moral education?
Well, I think, in part, I think you just answered the question, which is that purposes can be harmful. Hitler had a lot of purpose. People who do terrible things can have a lot of purpose. Extremists in this country can be zealots. They can have a lot of purpose. And so, as you know, I think the most important thing that we can develop in children is a moral identity. It's an identity, it's a strong commitment, deep internal commitment to fairness and honesty and care for others and integrity and truth, commitment to the truth, to justice. And that if we develop that strong moral commitment in children, then they are more likely to have moral purposes and more likely to do good things in the world.
Yeah.
If we don't, then people might still have purpose, but it won't be guided by moral values.
Yeah. That's so true. Sometimes I think in a lot of our discussions, we think purpose are some kind of internal characteristics. Sometimes they appear mysterious, something you either have or don't. But the more I read, the more I realized it can be kind of broken down into small, meaningful goals or that we can help as an outside support. So how can adults, both parents or teachers, or if you could choose either, help young people construct purposes with this more actionable stats? What would you say?
Yeah, so I think one step is sort of values clarification. Like, what is it you really care about deeply? And that can be deep because some people don't know what they care about deeply. And so sometimes you got to figure out what's getting in the way of people figuring out what they care about deeply. And it could be many things. It could be that they're too stressed about achievement, they're too stressed about financial pressure. So it's hard to figure out what you really care about. They're too anxious to please their parents, or they're too anxious to be in a high status college. So it's hard to figure out what you care about. Sometimes things like anxiety and depression can suppress what you care about. But I think that's part of the work is values clarification. It's figuring out what you care about. And I think and I think you're right that this is multiple steps. I think, another part of it is understanding the steps to get what your goals, what are the steps I need to take? Understanding whether you have the confidence to take those steps, or if you have uncertainties that need to be addressed about taking those steps. And so I think you're right. There are a number of different steps that you need to think about. And part of it is too that people have, in most of the world, people have limited opportunities too. So it's also matching what you care about with the opportunities available to you, or taking up the question of whether or not you can move or avail yourself of other kinds of opportunities.
Okay, yes. Thank you, Rick. One final question. This comes from our audience. Do you think there's like a critical age for purpose development? Do you think that there would be like if you develop at different stage, it will be really different?
I think that it's a good question, and I think the conversations are very different at different ages. I think when kids are in elementary school and middle school, it's sometimes fun to talk to them about what they might want to be when they grow up, and not in a way that's committing them to anything, but it's a way of getting to know them too, and to getting to know what they value. in high school, I'm working on I do a lot of work with college admissions officers, and I'm writing a report that I hope a lot of them will sign, that's basically saying to high school students, you don't have to have a single purpose. You don't have to say on your application, I want to be a chemical engineer or I want to be a dancer. That it's really fine. I mean, you can say that if that's true, that's your heart is set on that. But it's also really fine to say, I'm interested in engineering, but I'm also interested in the arts, or I'm interested in sociology, and so I want to take some time figuring out what I want to do. That's the message I think that we should be sending to people. A lot of us have multiple passions, multiple interests, and particularly in college, that seems like a good time to explore those.
Thank you so much, Rick, for your insight and thoughtfulness. I think.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
Yeah, you've given us so much to reflect on, not just as educators or parents, but as people, as for ourselves.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay.
Thank you. Take care, everybody. Be well.
OK，那么下面我们的生涯教育分论坛到今天就结束了，非常谢谢大家，谢谢大家今天能够来。那我们觉得其实，今天很可惜没有给更多时间给观众提问，所以我们非常希望能够继续这场对话。就像我们最开始说的，其实我们并不是在这里找到什么正确答案，而是想要去能够从中获得一些启发，能够继续下去这样子的探索的空间。然后最后主席。
感谢生涯教育分论坛的主创刘欣怡、汪希和嘉宾们带来的精彩分享和讨论，也感谢观众朋友的实时收看。现在本时段的议程已过半，接下来是休息时间，请大家稍事休整。10点将会开展我们的跨文化与多语言教育分论坛，精彩继续。